I was going to do a disclaimer, and then I totally forgot. People might think, if you're going to be really critical of the Gladio networks, which were clearly so anti-communist that, I might sound like I'm for a communist system. I'm not for a communist system, to just be clear. And
Yeah.
I think that was part of the problem of the Cold War, was that it's like, oh, are you for Gladio or are you for communism? And there was always the third choice, which was the best choice, which was the American legacy, which was the first to go against systems of empire and slavery. And so I'm for the proper principles that the Republic of the United States was founded upon, in terms of equal rights for all, the welfare of posterity, and the sort of economic system that was oriented for the first time, where you didn't view things within a serfdom, or that people should be in a slave system, but that you looked at every individual as a creative contribution to society. And it was shown, with 100 years, with the Centennial Exhibition, the United States was at the head of the world in terms of an economic and industrial progress, which is clearly shown through the fact of like how they were addressing this economic view of humankind. Because economics is not just about business; it's how you regard a human being, and how a human being should be treated in the world. And so I just want to make that clear, that that's the
Absolutely.
system I'm for.
And rest assured, this audience has been exposed to that concept over and over. Chris Paul calls it the controlled opposition dynamic, where like today we criticize the Republican Party ad nauseum, especially like the Bush wing, like the neocons. That doesn't make us Democrats. That doesn't make us pro Democrat. That just means that we recognize that the whole system is set up as a controlled opposition dynamic, and they want you to pick a side and then hate the other side. And the only winning move is not to play. You defect from the whole system.
I love this example as well that you threw out regarding the whole Vietnam War fiasco, regarding especially the idea of North Vietnam and Ho Chi Minh, who most of us have had a very negative image of because of, 60 years of propaganda, brainwashing. He's the evil supervillain type character. And then you actually look at who he was as a man and as a leader and as a poet. And he was a leader, statesman, and a poet himself. And his poetry is quite good from the translations I've read. But he wanted to model Vietnam's constitution, and he did. He drafted Vietnam's constitution verbatim on America's Declaration of Independence in 1946. And he had fully in his heart and in his hopes and in his words and in his actions the plans that after fighting the Japanese fascists and after decades and decades of having fought French imperial colonialism and fascists going back, as you said, to the 18th century or 19th century, that finally Vietnam was going to be a real country, a sovereign republic modeled on the United States, with economic industrial development assisted by the United States, where you had a lot of allies of Franklin Roosevelt and a lot of other anti-colonialists in America who wanted to help him do that, in other countries too, to be free of colonialism. And he was betrayed. And what did they do? They ended up, Alan Dulles and all these creatures that you outlined and a lot more, they ended up just working with the Japanese fascists and then working with the French fascists that were then reemployed in Gladio in Vietnam. Like, these were people who were working with the Nazis. The Vichy French fascists were repurposed and given control of Vietnam again. And the Vietnamese had to go back to their fight. And yeah, they have the only thing Ho Chi Minh could hold on to at that point after being backstabbed again and again was, okay, I can get an alliance with Russia and China. Okay, sure. Okay, let's fight under communism this time, whatever. But they were fighting already. It wasn't about communism versus capitalism. It was about the fight for liberty. And he just held on to whatever he could hold on to. And we were all given a lie about what the hell that was all about.
Yeah, and I think what's going to be an uncomfortable fact too is that, because Vietnam has a relationship with France, because France had colonized it, but you had a lot of communists in France who were listening to Ho Chi Minh, and they had been actually organized to boycott, because the ports were always a battleground between the mafia basically and, you know, a lot of communist groupings. And there was a lot of drug activity through the Corsican mafia that was happening through Marseille. And so the communists were being organized to sabotage this by basically striking. And they were going to refuse to go to work and all of this. And again, you know, this is what Paul Williams talks about in Operation Gladio. He says that, again, the CIA had come in to help the Sicilians and the Corsicans, I guess, like retake over the Marseille area. So again, it's like, it's just to say that the communists are not as villainous. I still, again, don't agree with the overall system, but it's just so bad, like what we've used to justify the Cold War. Like, people should really realize that the Cold War has not done anything for the welfare of like democracy or civil rights, you know, human rights. It's been used, as you were mentioning, Gordon, to get people to accept a police state situation, like 9/11 too, right? 9/11 was used to justify a police state that's pretty much still underway in the United States. Yeah. And by people getting sucked into thinking it's this like over the top ghoulish you know, villain that's like cartoonish almost, that they portray, and you're not actually looking at the source of the problem, which is in your own backyard. These kinds of Cold War antics are what constantly are used to take away your civil liberties, because they say, well, for national security, we can't give you your civil liberty.
Yeah. Like, and the very things they're using right now, they're weaponizing right now against all of us, is the Patriot Act. It's like that's exactly what they're using against us. And real quick on the Vietnam War, we talked about earlier about you know, the correlation between the mob and the CIA and even like popular culture. You know, the guy who was the head of the carrier battle group in the Gulf of Tonkin was George Stephen Morrison. His son, Jim Morrison, was the lead singer of the Doors.
Yeah,
that's a fact. That's a fact. He's the one who escalated the Gulf of Tonkin and created, basically gave Lyndon B. Johnson the authority or the validation to escalate the Vietnam War. And that was Jim Morrison's father, the singer of the Doors.
Cynthia, didn't you have something? Oh, sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, and it goes over, I'm sure you guys have talked about this, how they have this weird thing where they sacrifice, you know, their sons to these things. Like a lot of people in the military, you see their children are like used as like expendable tools. And it seems like his son was also like that, because you see what Jim Morrison looked like one summer, and then like over the period of just like one summer, he's like something totally different, and you're
like a clean cut,
like
Leave the Beaver kid all of a sudden one day, you know, with his pop on the ship in the military vessel, and then the next year, after what the hell happened to him, he comes out as this like Dionysian god, and you're like, what? On heroin, doing spasms on the stage. Like, how'd that happen? What did they do to you?
Yeah, just so everyone understands, that's Jim Morrison right there.
Right.
That is the lead singer of the Doors in 1964. As 1964, and that's the lead singer of the Doors.
Yeah. And it was wild because he had all of these songs that have become legendary. He came out of nowhere and just had all of these like songs already written for him. It seems he was like a package, but he was put through something where he did see himself as like a god figure.
He had some sort of like messianic, because I actually read a biography about him when I was younger, like in high school, and he definitely had some sort of like god complex or messianic complex, probably MK Ultra. I mean, he probably was put through something like that.
As did Charles Manson, who read the book Chaos, the CIA and Charles Manson, and he also was not a bad songwriter and singer. Actually, you listen to his recordings; not terrible in the sense, but he also had a god complex. He he had a little cult that did some bad things, but always controlled by the CIA, and was always part of the whole Scientology MK Ultra complex from the get go. It's always there. and for
And the
the mamas and
Unabomber.
the papas too. All of these figures who we've got these emotional connections to, especially baby boomers who like were coming of age, going through that process. Super deep spiritual, psycho-spiritual connections. And it's like, no, these are military industrial kids being sacrificed in some weird pagan social engineering experiment.
Dude. I mean, consider the fact that Elvis came out of the military. Like, that's where his entire music career started, in the military, while he was in the military. Jimi Hendrix too. I mean, Jimi Hendrix like came out of the military as well.
Oh,
I
I didn't
mean,
know that. Whoa.
yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, I might be wrong about that. Somebody fact check me on Jimi Hendrix. I thought Jimi Hendrix was a GI, but maybe he wasn't. But Elvis Presley, 100%, like, started his military career, and then I think they let him, because he became so big, but he still had like time left. So they're like, all right, we're gonna create like a special designation for you where you don't actually have to go like do anything military related. You're just gonna go on like a tour and like entertain the troops.
Huh. Cynthia, didn't you have some research that you pulled up regarding the infusion of the narcotics and drug culture as early as like the 1940s, 50s, like black jazz culture as well? That was because it's sort of like it reminded me of what they did with the crack cocaine culture to try to like influence Black America as going through the cocaine age and into the thug life 90s and beyond, always managed by these Jewish Italian mafiosos who are really ironically super racist and hate Black people, but they're like shaping the culture. And it's like these same things were already doing it back in the jazz den days. But what can you remind, like, can you say anything about that?
Harlem was the first justified place for them to start pumping the heroin through these networks into the United States. And it was justified because of racist reasons. It's Black expendable people. And Helliwell is directly connected with that decision to start funneling it into Harlem. And the thing with the jazz scene, which is really controversial, is that a lot of Black musicians weren't really allowed to participate in classical music, like opera or classical music, even though a lot of them had classical music training. And it's not to say that all jazz is like not good or anything, but there was clearly a culture that was being created around the jazz scene, which was heavy into drugs and sex. And it was like really sexualized and ultimately, bestialized. And there was a lot of like weirdness too, like the Cotton Club in Harlem, which was considered the like aristocratic, I forgot what they're called, but aristocratic something. And basically a lot of white people would go to this club to see like Black performers, as if like you're visiting a zoo, and like you can, have the experience and take your drugs and everything, but then you can leave and, go back to your nice area of the neighborhood. And these people were just subjected to that life. And so a lot of really good musicians like Charlie Parker and Billie Holiday, I like these people, but they got really bad heroin addictions and they died from their heroin use, which was really pushed heavily on people in Harlem.
Yeah, and that's also where like what informed or what inspired like Elvis Presley. Like Elvis Presley, it was like the jazz, it was gospel, like that's what led to him. So and the Beatles were heavily influenced by Black American music, like of like the 1930s, 1940s. So it's like this stuff, like you can see direct connections between how they took what you just described, and then they basically said, all right, we're going to repackage this for the masses and put it on television in the form of Elvis Presley, and then later the Beatles. And then that was the start of like American popular culture. And then that leads ultimately to like gangster rap of like the 90s, what you talked about earlier, Matt. Yeah.
Exactly. Like that's the thing that people need to realize is that, I mean, it was for Black and white musicians, that it was heavily controlled. Like your lyrics if your lyrics weren't what they wanted, you know, they were going to change the lyrics. They were going to tell you to change the music even. So if you wanted to have a career, and the music labels still today are like very, very tightly controlled for the image they want you. So it's not an organic phenomenon. You're not getting the creativity of the artist.
Yeah.
You're getting a manufactured product that was chosen for you to shape the culture that they want to see. And so again, a lot of drug heavy emphasis and all of this, it was controlled by the CIA and everything to encourage this level of drugs. So it wasn't a liberation of any sort. Like you were actually becoming more entrapped into this form of slavery.
Yeah, I was listening to, I think it was Roseanne Barr and Ice Cube who were having a conversation, a podcast, and yeah, Ice Cube. I think that was the podcast I was listening to. But anyway, it was Ice Cube going through just that very thing, just describing how he didn't have the freedom to compose or the lyrics that he actually had in his heart when he got into studio. Once you sign the record label with the record label, and you go into studio to record, they give you, or at least they nudge you very seriously into very specific themes that they want you to rap about, and you're not allowed to actually express yourself in an honest, authentic way because you've signed your soul away to the label. And that is specifically being done because, again, you look at like a lot of the motifs, like even walking around with pants like down so people could see your ass, you know, like that became cool. But where did that come from? Well, that came from prisons.
Prison culture.
Yeah, you weren't allowed to wear a belt in prison, right? For obvious reasons that you might commit suicide or use it as a weapon. So people's pants tend to fall pretty low in prison. And, you know, these, again, racist mafiosos who are the executives of these labels trying to think like, how do we market an image for that people will even pay money for, starting in that, I mean, probably before the 90s. Let's market the prison culture. So they'll want to mimic prison life, thug life, Murder Inc., all of these things that they will then pay money for and mold their hearts and ideals and around, right? And how they think of what their meaning is. It's about, you know, sex. It's about like how much bling you've got. Like normal human sentiments are not going to be accessible to these people who will thus be buying into their own slavery, thinking that that's their freedom. And they were doing that with, they called it what? Blaxploitation in the 70s, right? They called it Blaxploitation, and that became the culture of a lot of Black people who thought, yeah, that's my culture. It's like, that's not what they just, the name already says what it is. And the last thing I'll just say is it kind of reminds me as well of the young women. A lot of young women today are being told, oh, if you want to really emancipate yourself, have as much sex as you possibly can, you know, like even getting into, sometimes this even goes into like goth witchcraft. It goes into like really whorish stuff that all of a sudden your ability to be a whore becomes your freedom. It's like, who's laughing at you, right?
Total inversion. Total inversion.
Yeah.
And like the stuff that Kanye West got himself in trouble for a couple of years ago for talking about, like the Jewish oligarchy that he claimed controlled the music industry. Ice Cube said the exact same thing 30 years ago in 1994. There's a video that's floating around X that you can go find of him saying the exact same thing and saying how he had no, like these people would come into the room and they basically would tell them what to do and control them. And, you know, he was part of a group called NWA that started the entire gangster rap movement. And they recently, a few years ago, like Hollywood made a movie about like a biopic about those guys and that entire movement. But years ago, like 10 or 15, maybe even 20 years ago, Hollywood made like a fictionalized version of it called CB4. That was a total fictionalization, but basically the plot of the movie, they used to play it like on VH1 and MTV all the time. But the fictionalized version was that these four nice, like suburban Black kids who were like totally normal, had aspirations to, you know, be famous or whatever. And then they were like, all right, well, here's what you're going to do. And like the music executive comes in and says, all right, we're going to dress you up. We're going to put you in this gangster clothing. And the kids are like well-spoken and articulate. And like, they're even like classically trained in music and all that stuff. And they're like, all right, here you're going to do the, like all the stuff that you would imagine with like gangster rap. Like you're going to say all this stuff and they go into character and they do it on, and it was in my opinion, it was Hollywood like doing like a ritual, being like, we are telling you the truth through fiction, through artwork. We're telling you exactly how we do this. It was crazy. Like in hindsight, I'm looking at that and I'm like, that movie was complete disclosure on how it actually works.
Wow. Did you hear about that movie, Cynthia?
No, but Tupac was known, I think, for being
Yep.
classically trained.
Yep.
Yeah, Shakespeare ballet. Tupac actually performed ballet and he performed Shakespeare. He was super eloquent, very high level culture, and they just pulled him in with seductive promises of money, fame, and just women, and he bought into it and he became a conduit.
There are videos of Tupac when he's like 18, 19 years old speaking, and if you listen to it, it's like he doesn't sound like Tupac Shakur. He sound like you take that and then you compare it to like Tupac a few years later, and you're like, dude, he's playing a character. There's no way that those two are the same people, because he looks like, I mean, like, I'll be honest, it's like he looks like a gay man. He sounds like a gay man. Doesn't mean he was, but that's what he sounds like when he's speaking. And he's wearing like a pink shirt, and he's sitting there and he has like, and he's making like, and I'm like, dude, what? How is this Tupac Shakur? But that is Tupac. It's crazy, man. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we can have like a whole. We can keep on talking, because we're all passionate about this so deeply, because it's so important. Like when you start digging into things, at first you're looking at the conspiracy element of things and you're piecing things together. But at a certain point, you're like, how is this all possible? How are they getting away with this after so many generations and so much information readily available to anybody looking at it with half a brain? How could this go unseen or unreacted to? And you're like, it's the culture. It's the culture. That's the thing. And that's where the big battle lines are waged. Because again, like Cynthia, you did a lot of work on Friederick Douglas, the former slave who won his freedom and became an advisor to Lincoln. And I mean, he understood this. Not very few did, but he got it, and he really went out of his way to be he saw that the battle is for the mind. And he read the classics. He read Plato. He studied the highest quality, difficult literature to increase his capacity as somebody who can make discoveries and then transmit and communicate in a transformative way an audience in order to affect moral change in the universe.
Well, when he was 8, he was like, he was lucky and he had an opportunity to be in Baltimore, and he got his hands on a book, and that was like a kind of an encyclopedic book. And he was asking all the white kids in the neighborhood, like, what's this? And, he was like doing favors and stuff, like, to get them to teach him how to read. And he continued that, so that when he was eventually shipped back to the plantation fields, because, there was an issue with the family he was with, who were related to his master on the plantation fields, he taught himself how to read the Bible, and he was doing secret sessions on reading the Bible with other slaves on their day off. And when he eventually did escape to the north, and he was touring for a while with the abolitionists, he was so well spoken that people never believed he had been a slave, and he had lived his entire life under slavery until about the age of 21.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the real fight right there. And you get it when you listen to Malcolm X's speeches as well, right? Or Martin Luther King Jr. And you're like, that is a high caliber human being right there. And that's what the oligarchy is afraid of, is more people emulating that ideal and that standard that's being set of excellence. And it doesn't matter what color you are at that point. It's the high quality human that's coming through, and such that your whatever attribute you have as your skin color or your gender is really a secondary aspect. What's primary is your humanity, which brings us all into one brotherhood as something which we all aspire for: freedom, creative expression, the right to live with dignity, and to not live under oligarchy. That's human. And anybody who does that in any culture scares the hell out of the oligarchy, always. And the oligarchy will always encourage literature, movies, entertainment that take us away from those attributes that somebody like a Malcolm X or a Fred Hampton or Martin Luther King Jr. or Friederick Douglas were able to tap into, or John F. Kennedy. It's consistent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I don't know if y'all have anything else, but if not, we can kind of wrap up. Obviously, with this being a pre-record, everybody, we don't have rants. You can go to badlandsmedia.tv/support and put a boost up. Matt and I will catch all the boosts from the past. It'll be from this past week and the week moving forward. Next week, we'll read all those together. But yeah, I will say. I'll also plug GART one last time. So the reason we're pre-recording this is because on Wednesday I'll be traveling to South Dakota for GART. This is going to be very different from the other GARTs we've done because we have the panel set up in a really different way. We've kind of done the past 3 GARTs that I've been to. I didn't go to the first one, but the past 3 have been somewhat similar in like how the panels are set up. But this time we're doing something very different with very different models. We're going to have one that's a anti-federalist panel. So we're going to do like the federalist, anti-federalist kind of like debate from the constitutional era. I don't know, it'll be like an actual debate. It'll just be like a discussion, but that's going to be, I think, a fascinating one. We're going to do one on futurism and futuristic cities and, like moving away from the idea of like the Orwellian stuff and getting into like the exciting stuff of what we could potentially unlock if we do this the right way. A lot of other really great panels. So I think there's going to be some really cool stuff. You can get your virtual ticket on badlandsmedia.tv/events. I will drop the we'll make sure to put that in the description of this video when Brad makes it. But yeah, so it'll be Wednesday when this airs. So the first virtual thing will air on Thursday. So get your tickets. And yeah, Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have you back again to keep going because I think this rabbit hole goes deeper.
Yeah, there's a lot of threads. And Cynthia, don't forget to plug your book. How could people read your work and buy your book?
Yeah, they can follow my work on Through a Glass Darkly, Cynthia Chung. And I do have a book, The Empire on Which the Black Sun Never Set, that goes over a lot of Gladio material, and you can find a lot of it for free actually on my Substack if you want to just check it out that way.
All right, that'll be in the description box or in the comment section. People can find those things. So thank you, Cynthia. Guys, this is fun. Looking forward to
really fun. It's crazy how we go from talking about the Jesuits to talking about Tupac Shakur, but we did it. So
it was natural. It made sense.
Yeah.
Tupac in a pink shirt.
Tupac in a pink shirt, speaking with like a lisp, which that video will blow your mind if you watch it. You'll be like, wow, all of American culture is fake.
Wow. Mind blowing. All right. Thanks, guys. All right. Till next week.